Well, welcome again, everyone. As I mentioned, I want to talk about the teaching of the eight worldly winds tonight. This week, I've kind of been in the morning meditation group. I've kind of been sitting with the practice of equanimity, and the teaching of the eight worldly winds is a beautiful teaching around equanimity about not saying no to anything, about recognizing how things change, impermanence, recognizing the truth of impermanence, and that there is discomfort and there is joy, and that things pass, and there's pleasant and unpleasant, and to recognize that as part of the ebb and flow of life, and that we have these changing experiences, and that we're invited to understand it and to fully allow ourselves to have the freedom to be with the comings and goings without some push or pull of wanting, without any preference. And if we can truly be at ease and in recognition of all these changes of the pleasant and the unpleasant and the coming and going, then that's the path to freedom. That's the path to liberation, that not needing things to be a certain way, not believing that there's shoulds and musts and have tos. And so let me just, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, there's a sutta, the Loka Vipatti Sutta, that talks about these eight worldly winds or eight vicissitudes. Vicissitudes is a great word that no one ever uses, but it basically means change of fortune or circumstances, generally thinking that it's like towards the negative, but it's just the changing fortunes. It's just the winds of change. And so there's four pairs of these winds. As in much of Buddhist teaching, there are pairs, and they're gain and loss. There's gain, there's loss, there's pleasure, there's pain, there's gain. Did I say that? I mean, yeah, pleasure, praise and blame, and pleasure and pain. And then fame and ill repute or disgrace. I saw one thing that talked about insignificance, that there's fame and then insignificance, which I think is a nice way of giving that, presenting that opposite. And so in the sutta, it talks about, and the Buddha talks about, and the suttas talk about uninstructed worldlings a lot. Those are folks who are not on the path, who are not aware of the Dharma, of the teachings, who are lost in confusion, who are lost in greed, hatred, and delusion, ignorance. And when an uninstructed worldling comes in contact with these things, that person does not see it as change at all. It sees as pleasure. I must hold on to the pleasure. I have to push away the pain. They are in it without any reflection, without any awareness. They're just kind of caught up in these winds, and they're just blown around like tumbleweeds, or leaves, or whatever gets caught in winds and is blown around. However, instructed worldlings, those who are aware of impermanence, aware of how things change constantly, and that there is pleasant and there is unpleasant, there is discomfort, there's pain and pleasure. Those instructed worldlings see things as they are and reflect on them. They don't demean anything. There's no expectations. They don't say one is better than the other. There's no preference. They don't chase or rebel. What is it said? That they abandon welcoming and rebelling. They don't pull towards one and push away other. They're just, okay, right now it's like this. That is my favorite phrase. You've probably heard me say that several times. Right now it's like this. This is the invitation to be present with the way things are. One of my favorite definitions of equanimity is the ability to be with whatever is, to be intimate to be intimate with our experience without preference. And so to not have preference for either of these worldly winds is to have this sense of equanimity, this sense of ease, this ability to be with whatever shows up in our lives. And it's really, I think, harkens to the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha said that there is discomfort, there is suffering in this world. There's pain, there's birth, there's death, there's old age, there's sickness. We're going to be separated from everything we love. And so that there's that truth of suffering, of dukkha. And that I talked about this last week. I talked about insight, and to have that real understanding, that knowing of this willingness to be fully present with the discomfort when it's here, or to be fully present with the pleasant, because sometimes we struggle with that because of our conditioning. We think we shouldn't have this, we should have that, or it's going to go away, so I don't want to allow myself to experience it because I don't want to deal with the ending of it. I'd rather not have it at all. So this way of shutting ourselves off from the reality of life, this way of trying to build walls to protect ourselves from these vicissitudes, these worldly winds, but that doesn't work. It just kind of intensifies the discomfort. So the invitation to understand the nature of discomfort, that it happens, and that the condition that intensifies it and leads to more suffering is our craving for the pleasant all the time. As the Buddha said, the uninstructed worldling chases the pleasure and pushes away, repels the other. So to recognize when we're caught up in this chasing or rebelling is that intensifies the suffering. And then knowing that there is a way out, knowing the cessation of this suffering, the cessation of dukkha, is, the third noble truth. And then the Eightfold Path is really diving into that. How do I stay present? How do I let go of my preferences? And it's a deeper investigation of the characteristics of existence, of impermanence, and the unsatisfactoriness, and recognizing that there's no fixed self. There's constant shifting and changing and moving and growing and coming and going, that things are not just rigid. We think it would be so much easier if they were, it's just like right here. Okay, don't ever change. Then I'll be happy. The problem is, in my experience, that if I had had my way when I was 13 and things stayed exactly the way I wanted them to be when I was 13, and everything was exactly what I thought it should be, I might be dissatisfied today, lo these 50 years later, or however many years later it is. I mean, because we change, things change. So to recognize that this happens, so to move through this Eightfold Path with this clarity, developing this clarity. And we talked about, again, I was talking about that last week, this insight and clarity and discernment. So to begin to see. But what I love so much about these teachings is that they offer different perspectives of how we can begin to identify suffering, how we can begin to identify clinging or craving in our own lives. And the Eight Worldly Winds are such a lovely teaching around this. It breaks down these ways that we suffer. So I want to go through these a little bit. So there's gain and loss. And it was really interesting. I have notes from all the Dharma talks that I've given over the years, and I have notes from this. I gave this talk for the first time back in 2009. That's when I was just starting teaching, and that's right when we had the financial implosion, when everything blew up, and there was a tremendous amount of loss, people lost 401ks, they lost houses, they lost their homes, they lost their jobs. It was really a scary time for a lot of people. And there's been a lot of recovery in some areas, and there hasn't been a lot of recovery in other areas because of the inequities in our society. But that what we were focused on then is different, is changed, and now there's different losses, and there's been so many gains and losses through those times. But to recognize that things are constantly moving, I thought that was just a really interesting recognition that we all remember that time. That was really okay. And then last year we had the pandemic. There was another whole series of losses. And then also a whole series of gains. I mean, it's not all black or white, and we wish it could be all black or white because it would be so much easier. Just make it be a particular thing. I was reading something today. I think it was, I don't remember what it was. It was, but it was written by Larry Rosenberg, who's a teacher, and he was talking about, and this is a line that a friend of mine used to use all the time. He used to say, and it must be, I think it's from a movie. It's like, tell me what to believe. Just tell me what to believe. You know, it'll make it so much easier. And that's when people get so rigid about things. That's so fundamentalist belief. It's like, this is the way it is, and it doesn't allow any room. And so if you have gain, if you have this whatever you've gained, whether it's monetary or the sense of normalcy, you know, we need to get back this normalcy. We've lost normalcy, and how do we get it back? Instead of realizing that that's just an idea, that's just a fabrication of the mind. We just, you know, what we have is pleasant, and maybe the next thing, the loss is unpleasant. But how can we just accept what is and recognize that this is going to happen? It's not because we're good. It's not because we're bad. It's not, maybe we've made decisions that have us land in certain places. But what this teaching is about is also not taking things so personally. We just can't take things so personally. There's a Tibetan saying that says, accept what comes, let go of what leaves. There's gain and there's loss. Accept that what comes and let go of what leaves. I didn't get this because I'm super duper, and I didn't lose it because I suck. It's just, it comes and it goes. It comes and it goes. And so this is a good place, if we get caught up in that, recognize the craving that's there, the craving for the gain, recognize the fear of lack. You know, we live in a society that tells us there's a huge lack and there's not enough to go around, so you better get yours. So really be aware of that, because it's not true. It's just the conditioning that we've had. And so to see where we get caught up in those stories of, I must have this. I saw a thing the other day about another way of framing these wins, these four pairs. And for this one, it says, hope for gain and fear of loss. So I like that. It's a hope for gain and a fear of loss. So there's that fear in there. So to recognize the fear and to be with it. What does that feel like? What does loss feel like? Instead of fighting it, come into awareness of it. Be with loss. I was listening to Lions Roar Lions Roar, the Buddhist magazine, has a podcast, which I didn't know about until recently. And I was listening to a little talk that Lama Rod Owens gave. And he was talking about, and I really love this. He says, we have to mourn what we can't impact or change. And so if there is a loss, instead of fighting and screaming, yelling, really mourn it. Touch that sense of loss. Recognize that it's part of the human condition, just as gain is, and not that we're bad or wrong, but to be with it. How can you be with it? With compassion. Really important, compassion and love towards our experience. And then when there is gain, bring that joy without the fear of it going away. Be joyful that it's present. Celebrate what's there. So that's gain and loss. The next one is fame and ill repute, or success and failure. Or what does he say? Hope for fame and fear of insignificance. That what are people saying about you? You know, and I know that's one. It's like they better, oh, please, please, please. And what that does is it drives so much of our behavior. I mean, I have to make sure people see me a certain way. I have to make sure I have this view of myself, or I think I have this view of myself, and I want you to see me a particular way. And it's all good. And if it's not, then it's like almost unbearable. So that gets into praise and blame too. Some of these kind of mix around the edges, but fame, I remember having this conversation in a humanities class in college. Do you want to be famous now or after you're dead? And I'm like, I could care less about after I'm dead. I want to be famous now. Or, there's a whole bunch of talk about legacy, and history will judge these people harshly. And it's like, I don't know if they care. I don't care. I mean, what about my legacy? I don't care. Um, Thankfully, I don't care. But where we get caught up in wanting to be seen in a particular way, this sense of self, this self-view, satiety, which is a word I love. It's like how I see myself and how I think people should see me and how I should be. I am this and this and this and this, and that's what I want to be known for. And so often I'm not. So often I'm just a human being. Pema Chodron said in her book, Start Where You Are, she said, even people who are enlightened get snot in their nose when they have a cold. And that was a profound sentence for me. That was profound. So to recognize that, what people are gonna say about us is what they're gonna say about us. It has nothing to do with us. And like I said, this goes into praise and blame, whether people think we're wonderful or people think we're awful. When I was working, particularly when had my job in corporate America, I had a really good experience. I don't want to diss corporate America as far as my experience is concerned, although corporate America has a lot to answer for. Anyway, if I did something well and I got a pat on the head, I was walking on water. But if somebody else got a pat on the head, I was terrified that, it's not a zero-sum game. There's not a finite amount of praise to go around. But that's what my fear was. What did they say? Hope for praise and fear of blame. Because it's like, oh, if I'm not being praised, then am I being blamed? And please don't blame me. I would lie. I was an inveterate liar. I came to it at a very young age, trying to make sure I wasn't, get in trouble. Even if it wasn't anything that was going to get me in trouble. It's just, what do I think you want to hear? And I will lie to make sure you see me in a particular way, so I'll have a pat on the head. And so I would, just to get out of not being praised or for fear of being blamed. But if there was blame to go around, I was definitely going to come up with some rationalization to get out of feeling discomfort. I can't feel discomfort. It's this drug that we chase sometimes. The disgrace. We want the fame. We don't want the disgrace or the insignificance. We want the praise. We don't want the blame. There's what we have to do is to recognize that it's tied to ego. It's tied to our sense of self, which is just created. We have taken birth as this person who thinks it needs to be a certain way. I have to be seen this way. I have to have these things. Instead, can we develop some humility? Recognize its ego. And it's just, all this stuff is just a creation of the mind. It's just a fabrication. And we're so entranced by these stories. We're trapped by them. And they cause so much discomfort. The first time I taught a class, I shared a talk with my teacher, and somebody got up in the middle and walked out. And I didn't notice it, but somebody told me afterwards they put their hand in the Donna bowl and took money out. Now, I don't know if that was a statement about me or they were just stealing money or whatever it was. But I got I think to sit in this place or any kind of place like that, you have to recognize that. And then somebody else will say, that was the best talk I ever heard in my whole life. You changed my life. And it's like, okay, somebody's walking out and taking their Donna back. And then somebody else said it really helped them a lot. So it's not about me. None of this stuff is about us. We have to recognize that's how other people receive it. It's how it lands based on their conditioning. And to when we have that equanimity, we're able to hold it and go, oh, maybe that unkind word did hurt, but can I just be with it? Can I bring compassion and see what part of me is holding on to that? What part of me needs to have people see me in a certain way? What part of me needs to have people say X, Y, or Z to me in order for me to be okay? Because that's often what drives us, this ego, this I, this me, this mine, this fabrication. And then the last set is pleasure and pain. Again, this is that root of craving. We crave for sensual pleasure and push away pain. Pain is inevitable. Pain is inevitable. And when we push it, when we fight it, it intensifies. It absolutely intensifies. So how can we be compassionate towards the pain? It's so important. It's so important. I saw a line that said, being swept away by any of these vicissitudes can cause emotional instability because we're caught in this trap of trying to get back where we were or back where we think we want to be. When it's unpleasant, we want to get to a certain place. And when it's pleasant, we never want it to change. So recognizing, I think what's really important about this teaching is to recognize which of these may resonate with you, because not all of them do. I mean, some of them may. I mean, to a certain extent, we are we can resonate with all of them, but some of them may be more pronounced in our lives than others. For me, it was, the praise and the blame was the one, the fame and the disgrace. As I said, for me, those two bleed into each other because I was so terrified of what people thought. And it comes from, it's a deep core conditioning in my life and how I grew up in the situation I was in my family and in my world, that this conditioning of how I needed to be and how you needed to be. And so until I started practicing, until I started being willing to sit with the discomfort of maybe somebody gets angry at me. It's like, oh, okay, what does that feel like? Not the story about it, but how does it feel here? Can I greet it with kindness? Can I greet it with an open heart, with compassion? We're so interested in fixing, and there's nothing to be fixed. That's what I heard Larry Ward say that a couple of weeks ago. There's nothing, we don't need to be fixed. We're just transforming how we see the world. We're transforming how we relate to the world. So it's not so much clinging and craving and aversion or a delusion. Instead, it's this balance of saying, oh, now this is, right now it's like this, right now it's like this. We learn to let go of our amazing ideas about how things should be. That's the practice of renunciation, letting go of what we think it should be, to see how renunciation is not just letting go of stuff that causes suffering so we'll be a good person and check off the list, but to see how this place we're stuck in causes discomfort, causes dissatisfaction and suffering, and to let go. There's more space, there's a breathing room, there's an ease that arises, so we can have an ease even when there's pain. We can have ease even when there is blame. Because I can sit here for the next 30 years and there's going to be praise and blame. You know, we see it in our society all the time. It seems to be very magnified right now. These worldly winds are magnified through the news and the the social media and all the stuff that happens, that we're inundated with. That it's just like these talking heads and this person, that person, that person, this person. It can be incredibly painful, and so we have to really develop ways to skillfully move through this world of uninstructed worldlings who may be causing a lot of harm, and can we move through it in a way that we don't cause harm to ourselves or to others. So as you reflect on this, maybe reflect on which of these may be most operative in your life, um, and what stories are involved in them. I think with all of these teachings, it's what story do I tell myself, and what story can I recognize? You know, oh, I'm on the outside looking in. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. It's I. We've just taken birth as a person who feels a particular way, instead of recognizing, like, oh, here comes that feeling again. Here comes that feeling of being an outsider. Therefore, blame is especially painful. Recognizing the story instead of putting it on and making it how you walk through the world. I've talked about that a lot, but it's a really important distinction to take a step back from this total identification and instead just recognize, oh, this is the experience of blame. This is unpleasant. This is the experience of loss. This is unpleasant. Okay. And it's impermanent. And it'll pass. And we also do some reflection and seeing if we've done things that are unwise or unskillful, because we may have put ourselves in positions to have these uncomfortable experiences. It's not about not reflecting. It's not a practice of being dismissive. It's not a practice of bypassing. Oh, well, there's praise and blame. If somebody says we did something, just, not, oh, it's just blame. They're just blaming. It's just, it's like, oh, maybe bring some reflection and some taking responsibility for our lives. That's incredibly important. And that's where we're supported by the ethical practices in the Eightfold Path. The precepts. How am I showing up in these areas? Am I causing harm? So it's really important to have this fully rounded practice of ethical behavior and reflection, and making the effort to see where we're caught up, and coming back to what's actually happening, not the thoughts or the ideas or the how we think it should be, but to really be fully present. So yeah. And then also on just finally, at a larger level, we have to recognize the societal aspects of this. There's a lot of loss, and there's a lot of gain, and there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of blame, and there's a lot of harm being caused. And to recognize that societies go through these worldly winds. It's not just personal to us, but it's big picture. And we do what we can, but recognize that there's no watch how we can tend to get caught in having the answer, knowing how it should be, and getting caught up in that. I don't truly believe. I used to think I had all the answers, but I laugh and say, if you asked me, I'd have the answer to world peace and hunger and all these things. If you would only do it the way I think it should be done, then it would be great. All these things, but letting that go and recognizing that these are sometimes generational issues that continue for a long time. And we work towards ending harm where we see it, but also be willing to be with the pain, be with the discomfort. And as Lama Rod said, mourn what we can't impact or change, because we can't impact or change everything. How can we be with the discomfort and still continue and still be with the joy that's present, to be with the pleasure that's present? Because there is joy in this life. Don't miss the joy for hanging out so much with the suffering. So I think that's what I have. So thanks so much for your attention, and I hope it's of benefit in some way, shape, or form.